With this naturally charismatic leadership, the revered father of the nation of the world's largest democracy will continue to be an inspiration for leaders in the future generations. To quote just one of the teachings of this great leader, the difference between what we do and what we are capable of doing would suffice to solve most of the world's problems. And that's why we are here. We are here as a stakeholder community. The World Economic Forum is based on the principle that business, governments, civil society alone cannot solve the issues which we confront in our world of today. We need collaborative platforms on a global and on a national level. And therefore, I greet particularly the stakeholders of the World Economic Forum, the political leaders who are here, the business leaders, our partners, the representatives of civil society and academia, and also the young generation, our global leaders, young global leaders, and our global shapers. Just raise your hand, the global shapers and young global leaders. So we see we have a strong young dimension built into this meeting. And last not least, I should also mention our social entrepreneurs, and we are very honored to celebrate this year also the 10th anniversary of handing out and nominating social entrepreneurs together with the Bhartiya Foundation in India. Ladies and gentlemen, our world is going through dramatic transformation which impact all of us. Geopolitical forces are fast changing the traditional context, even in disruptive ways. The fourth industrial revolution, and technology will be a major part of our discussions here, is transforming business models and reshaping national competitiveness. Innovation in the business sector, but also in the public sector, becomes the driving force for economic development and social progress. Talents are today the key driver for progress. And I would say we are in an age where talentism is replacing capitalism. I'm proud to report that during the last year, India has now opened the first Indian Center for the Fourth Industrial Revolution, integrated into our global network of centers to shape the future technologies. Last week, Prime Minister Narendra Modi told business leaders in New York that the combination of Western rational ways and Indian human values can show the path which the world is looking for. If we look at our times with a historical perspective, we are probably in a great transformation, helped by the Fourth Industrial Revolution, where hopefully we move from a society of production and consumption much more to a society of sharing and caring. I wish you a great meeting, and I have now the pleasure to invite the panel under the leadership and the moderation of my friend and colleague, the President of the World Economic Forum, Børge Brende.
Good morning. Thank you so much to our founder and executive chairman, Professor Klaus Schwab, that so strategically started the cooperation with India more than 40 years ago. It's a unique partnership, and we also appreciate a lot the great partners that we have in India. From this year, formally, the government of India, we see here, represented with the Ministry of Commerce, and also our long-standing partner, CII. So it is my honor to then give the floor to Dr. Gurun Prasad Mohapatra. He's the Secretary of the Department for Promotion of Industry and Internal Trade. So, Doctor, the floor is yours. Please welcome.
Very good morning to all of you, distinguished political leaders from India, distinguished captains of industry from the globe as well as from India, ladies and gentlemen. We are delighted to partner with the World Economic Forum and the CII on the India Economic Summit, as this is the 35th year of the forum's engagement in India and the 50th year of its founding. It's an opportune time to take this relationship to the next level. With over 800 participants from 40 countries and a strong group of co-chairs, I am certain that this summit will be an important platform to discuss India's narratives on the regional and global challenges and showcase it as an attractive investment destination. We in India are on the cusp of a great opportunity, and we are targeting directly to reach the $5 trillion US dollar economy by 2024 and $10 trillion US economy by 2030. This is entirely in the realm of the possibilities and achievable in India. All the right conditions exist. It's a strong policy-driven government, both in the center as well as in the states. And I'm sure this captainship of the industry by the government will steer India to achieve these milestones. Whether it's the ease of doing business, where we have made significant strides from where we were 5 years back, we are now in 77, and I expect in the next DBR ranking of the World Bank, our position will further improve. With the strong startup ecosystems or the strong policy incentives that the government of India has recently announced to boost investment, I'm sure India will definitely achieve the $5 trillion economy in very soon. This World Economic Forum deliberations today will give us a lot of ideas on how to progress. I'm very thankful to the World Economic Forum and CII to give us this opportunity to be associated with this landmark event. I'm sure this event will continue in India year after year and bring a lot of opportunities to all of us. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Secretary. It's a great honor for us to formally partner with the government of India. And then to our long-standing partner, CII, it is my honor to introduce Mr. Chandrait Banerjee. He's the Director General of the Confederation of Indian Industry, CII, and also a great friend of both Klaus and myself. So, CB.
Excellencies, global leaders, chief ministers, ministers from the world, ladies and gentlemen, a warm welcome on behalf of CII. Also, as you heard, we have been a proud partner since the start of this summit in 1985, and this is the 33rd time that we are doing it since then, the 35 years of partnership. This has been a phenomenal partnership, and we really value the World Economic Forum's bringing in the type of discussions onto the table year on year to make understanding of global challenges and really give us those insights which CII takes forward with its membership of 300,000 people in the 300,000 companies in India. Today, we are faced with several global challenges, and both India is not left out of those challenges. And while we work on those challenges, this particular summit, this particular edition of the summit becomes extremely relevant because of the focus that we are doing with South Asia and our neighbors. And this new dimension, which has been brought in by the World Economic Forum, is of great, great value. I'd like to particularly thank Professor Klaus Schwab, who has consistently, year on year, given so much of importance to India and created this summit so very uniquely over the last many years. Professor Schwab, thank you very much for your leadership and your support. This is also unique because we don't only have the countries from the region, from the South Asian countries, we also have, besides the central government, as the secretary of the DPIIT spoke, as a partner for this summit. And we also have the state governments. The future of India really lies in the states of India. And it's so much of a great pleasure to see two of our outstanding chief ministers of Goa and of Madhya Pradesh seated over here. Welcome to you, Mr. Chief Ministers. And their participation, and we'll have other states also participating in the subsequent sessions. And that makes this particular partnership so very important. Ladies and gentlemen, today, we have this 35th time of this conference over here, through which we will see a further integration of Indian firms, Indian companies, and of India with the globe. And in today's context, when global trade is so strongly challenged, this would again act as a very strong platform in seeing how we can integrate much more with the globe. Once again, thank you very much for being here, and a very warm welcome to each one of you. Thank you.
So, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, with that very effective and to the point opening session, everyone was sticking to the time. It is my great honor to invite our distinguished co-chairs to the co-chairs opening panel. Please. So as you can see, we have a very distinguished panel also of our co-chairs. We're so honored to have you all here, and we are so much looking forward for these 2 days together. On my left hand here, to the right of you, we have Heng Swee Keat. He's the Deputy Prime Minister of Singapore, but also the Finance Minister. We have also Sania Mirza. She is a famous sports person here, the best female tennis player of India, and also the UN Women Goodwill Ambassador for South Asia. We have number 3 here. We have Shobana Kamineni, that many of you know. She's the Executive Vice-Chairperson of Apollo Hospitals Enterprise India, one of the leading healthcare entities in this country. Then we have Shailendra Singh. He is the Managing Director of Sequoia Capital in Singapore, one of the largest venture capital companies in the world. And then we have Gillian Tans. She's the Chairwoman of Booking.com. I think no one doesn't know Booking.com, and I think we all have tried Booking.com. So I think let's give them a warm welcome, the panel. And the co-chairs. Let me start with you, Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister. As you also heard in the speech of our founder and executive chairman, Professor Schwab, we are in volatile economic times. We see a great shift also when it comes to technologies. The World Economic Forum has established now centers for the fourth industrial revolution many places in the world. But at the same time, we're seeing looming trade wars. We're seeing slowing global economic growth. And we see this is even now affecting ASEAN and South Asia. So what kind of leadership does it take now, Deputy Prime Minister, to find common solutions to possibly revive growth and not end up in an unnecessary recession?
Well, thank you, Roger, for the question. I want to thank Professor Klaus Schwab for inviting me for this forum. Now, you asked about what kind of leadership do we need for us to deal with this problem. I think first and foremost, I think we need to be honest with the issues at hand. Because I think we are going through, as Professor Klaus Schwab mentioned earlier, we're going through a period of very transformative changes. And I think in several areas, one is in globalization. There are some parts of the world that supports globalization. There are some parts of the world that are retreating from globalization. And why is that so? Part of it is that there are many people in the world who feel that globalization has left them behind. They have not benefited from globalization. Now, the second big change is technology. The technological changes are progressing at a very rapid pace and will continue to progress even more. So, in fact, about a year back, Professor Klaus Schwab gave me a book on the fourth industrial revolution. It's a very thoughtful book, and that it has been published. And there are lots of things that he pointed out that it is not just one or two technology, but how different technologies are converging, and therefore reshaping existing industry structure, reshaping existing competitive advantages. So in a period of change, we need to double down to make sure that we are prepared for the changes. And the third big trend that is occurring is growing inequality both within country and across countries. Developments are very uneven. And even in very big countries, China and India are good examples. You'll find that there are cities which are growing very well, very dynamic, very innovative, but there are also regions which are not getting the full benefit of that growth, for which a whole range of policy measures will be needed. So what do we need to do? I think first, we need to have a mindset that we have to balance a range of what may appear contradictory objectives, but they are actually complementary if we do it well. So let me just mention a few of these contradictions. One is the contradiction between what apparent contradiction? One is between economic dynamism and innovation and growth versus equity and inclusive growth. I think economists in this room will know that we always try and draw the production possibility frontier and look at what are the trade-offs we can make. The work on raising the production possibility frontier is really about how we can embrace globalization, openness, free trade, in order that the resources that each of us has that is so limited can be expanded so that we are at the frontier of this change. But at which point of frontier do we settle on is a matter of equity. What is it that we should do in order to have growth that is equitable, where it's inclusive, and people do not feel that they have been left out. And in turn, that supports globalization, because if I feel that I have benefited from globalization, I'm more likely to support. Now, of course, it's easier said than done. If I'm a consumer and I benefit from cheaper products from developing countries, would I say that it's the benefit of globalization? No. I'll say that, well, great, I have a great supermarket, great Walmarts and Amazons and Alibaba and so on. I would not attribute it to globalization. But it is actually the fruits of globalization that is shared with us as consumer. But if I'm a worker and I got out of job, I'll say it is globalization that has disrupted my job, that has taken away my job. And it is very easy then for us, particularly as political leaders, to put the blame on other countries than to say, well, we need to really work hard at structural reforms of our economy. So which brings me to my second point. which is on the short run and long run. I think following the global financial crisis, we see a lot of countries, a lot of central banks have pursued, in fact, all over the world, pursue ultra low interest rates. Interest rates have gone down, quantitative easing has taken place, and the result is that we are today in a period of ultra low rates, even negative rates. And my own view is that monetary policy and fiscal policy can only stabilize the economy, not put the economy onto a different growth path. To put the economy on a different growth path, we need structural policies. We need to change rules, regulations, rules on investment. We need to provide investors a certain degree of certainty, and particularly if they need to invest in the long run, we need a framework for innovation. And what we try to do in Singapore is to create regulatory sandboxes for new and innovative things, because new rules will have to be crafted for new business models, new ways of trade and exchange across economies. So we need to do structural policy for the long run and economic, monetary and fiscal policy for the short run. And then, of course, the balance between capital and labor, we need to make sure that capital has its proper returns, and in turn, labor has a proper return on their labor. Again, it's easier said than done, but I would not see it as contradictory, because we have done studies in Singapore, for example, that shows that companies that have better returns on their assets are also companies that are able to pay their workers better wages and provide better job certainty. So if we can work out new models of evolving the economy, I think we'll all benefit. And of course, the other major change that we need to make is on sustainability. Yesterday, I was at the Rajghat paying my respect to Mahatma Gandhi. He's a great leader, he's a great father of the nation, of India, as well as a great inspiration for all of us around the world. And he has always been looking at the issue of inclusive growth, of sustainable growth. And you combine that with what Professor Klaus Schwab said earlier, but how do you do all this in a period of transformative changes? What new business model do we need? So we are inspired by the ideals of Mahatma Gandhi, but we also then have to then look at how do we look at the world today so that we can make the changes that are needed. And one very important area which Professor Klaus Schwab mentioned earlier is the development, first of talent, because in the digital age, talent will be key to dynamism, right, to economic dynamism. But at the same time, talent is not just about the top leadership. It is also about all our workers. We want to make sure that every worker has the right skills to do the job. And so how do we bring up our workers? How do we help them to grow new skills for new jobs will be key. And I'll just add the last point, which is the values. I think, again, the values will be key in how we navigate across these different changes. So I'll stop there.
No, thank you, Deputy Prime Minister. This was the best framing, I think, possible for the coming days. Just a short follow-up question. You said that fiscal policy, monetary policy can only know in this situation stabilize the economic situation. To revive growth, we need structural changes. And I think many of us look to Singapore for also good policies. So what, as a finance minister, what are the structural changes will you then introduce to be even more ready for the fourth industrial revolution in your country in the coming years? And can we learn, and what can we learn in South Asia and the rest of ASEAN from what you're doing?
Well, first, I would say that it's not just what South Asia can learn from Singapore, but what Singapore can learn from South Asia and around the world. So that's a very important point. Now, what is it that we are doing? I will just qualify my remarks slightly, that in the case of monetary policy, it's quite clear that you cannot have excessive stimulus of the economy because all you can do is to dampen the cycles. But in the case of fiscal policy, again, if we are thinking of just prime priming the economy, that will just lead to a moderation of the cycle, and in fact, it may exacerbate the cycle. So if you look at the cycle of debt in many economies, it is a problem when government takes excessive debt for current spending rather than, say, for long-term infrastructure development. And when that happens, it will end up with bad consequences later. But on the other hand, what we need to do in fiscal policy, and I strive very hard to do that in every budget, is to make sure that the government resources, which will always be limited, is put to the best use. And about 1/3 of my budget goes into restructuring of the economy. Where does it go to? One, on research, innovation, and enterprise development. Because in the age of the fourth industrial revolution, we must support our universities in doing basic research. We must support our companies to do corporate research. And we must then help our workers, help companies to restructure jobs, and then help our workers to learn new skills. So a big part of my budget goes towards that. And two, there's also another part of my budget that goes into encouraging companies to engage in corporate social responsibilities. Because I do not see companies as the problem. I see companies as the solution. Because whether it is in how you restructure the jobs so that workers, old or new, young or old, and new hires or existing workers, can all upgrade together with the company. And of course, I can understand that companies may need to change the workforce profile, in which case we in government must try our best to work together with industry to reskill our workers. So that's how we try to do that in terms of research innovation, skills development, and getting the right policies. And I spend a lot of time with my economic ministers, my manpower ministers, to look at issues on the economy. And I spend a lot of time with my health minister to look at how we can take better care of our seniors, as well as develop our young people better. And our education minister, of course.
Thank you. Shailendra Singh, you're based in Singapore, but you also have a foot here in India. And I know that your company is one of the largest venture capital companies in the world. Look at the importance of technology in general, but also how technology is transforming this region. And we also work together, World Economic Forum and you on the fourth industrial revolution. So how is technology transforming this region?
I see that our chair is calling on the minority on this panel.
I think first it's a privilege to be here. It's also a privilege to be a minority on this panel. So thank you so much for having me. I think we feel very humbled to witness very transformational rise of technology in India, Southeast Asia, South Asia. And I really feel like the next decade will be sort of the golden decade for technology and entrepreneurship in this region. And it's wonderful that the government in India, the Startup India movement in Singapore, in Jakarta, in Indonesia, in all parts really of South Asia and India, governments are so supportive. What we've been stunned and surprised by is, there's been a compounding effect of a few different trends. It started about 4 or 5 years ago when cheap smartphones first started happening in this part of the world, and smartphones became prolific. And then then there was a Reliance Jio movement, and then there was a UPI movement which allowed millions of daily transactions in a very short period of time. And then there's been the GST movement, and I think the compounding power of some of these very structural shifts is that I think we are in a pretty unprecedented zone for India and also in Southeast Asia, in the pace at which innovation is happening, in the speed at which companies are developing, and the deep impact they're having on society. And if anything, we are constantly wrong, we find, in underestimating the potential of the new innovative companies of today. Even though we might invest in them, we are pleasantly surprised that we under-budgeted their impact and scale frequently. And when we invested in Byju's 4 or 5 years ago, we didn't expect that thousands of small towns and cities kids would be using Baiju for education. Or when we invested in Gojek in Indonesia or in Tokopedia in Indonesia, we didn't expect that in 4 or 5 years, these companies would become amongst the 10, 15 most valuable companies of that country in such a short period of time. So I think we're all extremely fortunate to be at this juncture when technologies, and by the way, both Gojek, Tokopedia empower over 1 million merchants, small merchants, to earn a living on their platform. And so I think we are at a pretty unprecedented time when the structural shifts have already happened, and very, very large-scale impact deep down into even rural India, through things like UPI. The financial inclusion efforts of the government through UPI are extraordinary. In fact, we discuss it all around the world as probably the most, I think India has the most advanced financial payments and KYC, eKYC infrastructure and so on and so forth. And it's very apparent. I mean, whether it's the rise of Google Pay or PhonePe or Paytm or many other companies, I think we are all very lucky to witness this transformation. And I think, it's a really empowering time. And, I'm thrilled to have so many founders here and young technologists here in the audience today, in addition to so many distinguished ministers and industrialists.
Thank you. Shobana Kamineni, you are heading one of the largest healthcare brands in India. I have 2 questions to you. One is, of course, the role of healthcare. We know that India is a 1.2 billion people country. There is a developing country, but in many areas also quite advanced. There is inequality issues also related to healthcare, but you're a big provider. How you look at this from your perspective? And my second question is related to what the Deputy Prime Minister mentioned about the importance of skills and reskilling. You're also sharing this accelerator that the World Economic Forum has established here in India for upskilling and reskilling. And we know that the 50% of the workforce here needs reskilling and upskilling to have the right skills when we're facing the 4th Industrial Revolution. So,
thanks, Jorge. Pretty large canvas but I want to keep it short because I know that many of you here understand the issues that face us and the inequalities. One is that, the primary that we think about is you cannot have great healthcare unless you keep people well, because there's no one, whether it's public, private, that can spend enough to build enough to serve 1.3 billion Indians who are not well. So the primary motive is to keep them well. And what do we do in addressing those inequalities? And I think it comes from a variety of things. The government talks about building 150,000 primary healthcare centers this year. I think that it cannot be addressed just by the government. This is where the private sector comes in to address those inequalities. I think that education is going to be a huge one, and it's an opportunity. It's also a challenge, but this is where education will come, that we can actually create better nutrition to serve and address inequalities in many areas. And it's not just about starvation, but it's about getting your basic levels up. It's about detection early, because, in India for years, we've picked up cancers when they're stage 4, when cancer is so curable and the cost is so much less. So the actual GDP burden of addressing and making people healthy earlier, I think will be huge in terms of addressing inequalities. And I think they're not just hospital players, but everybody can get into this from an education perspective, from a technology perspective, and this is where we can all start playing in that. The second is access, and I really want to say that the top of access and making it and reducing inequality is what the government has boldly stated, of 500 million Indians. We will give them access and give them 500,000 rupees for hospitalization. And 500,000 rupees is a big number. It will take care of cancer in India, the cost of cancer, to take care of an open heart and many large surgeries. And I want to say that this was incubated in many of the states. healthcare is still a state subject. So the states picked it up, and I think that the central government and especially the Prime Minister gave it a fantastic focus. So it's up to the private sector to actually participate, because if you look at the numbers for the last, from the beginning of India, the private sector has actually contributed 80%. The government has been spending only about from 1.5% to now possibly 2.5% of their GDP in healthcare. I mean, this is astonishingly low for giving care and addressing inequalities. And I think the private sector really has in the past stepped in and will continue to step in. So it's, and this is from the trusts, from the CSR, from for-profit hospitals like ours that do it at 1/10 the cost of any other country to do it, to give people advanced treatment. So this is addressing inequalities. The third, I think that the inequality that we can address, which is an interesting one, because I had brought it up earlier, that Klaus Schwab had brought up nicely in terms of diversity. This is an economic problem of not having enough women in the workforce here. And you addressed it in this panel. See the inequality here, good inequality, that there are more women up here, and this is the thing that we have to find.
Other co-chair also, Sheikha Hasina.
Of course, yeah. So. I definitely weighed. I mean, she stands for a country, and I think that we finding enough great jobs for women, and healthcare does it. Really, healthcare addresses that. If you see, even in our hospitals or even the workforce, it's almost equal. In medical colleges today, there are more women doctors being trained than men. And will they get great jobs? Yes, they will. And I think this is something that is a great segue. So these are the three that I would talk about addressing inequality in healthcare. Is one, the prevention and the environmental aspects. Toilets, sanitation, and all. The second is access of Ayushman Bharat. The third is training a better workforce. I mean, making it more equitable, and which is a segue into the skills.
Yeah. And 1 minute on the skills, and then we have to move on.
Exactly. So quickly on skills, I think that India is a land that is creating, that needs so many jobs. All of you know it. Every year, we also have a large population that needs to be reskilled. There's a huge population in labor where there are too many people for doing too little. So under all these circumstances, we have to find right jobs, and I think that's something that is a challenge that we must throw out for this century. Of while we continue to think, how are we going to go global? How are we going to be lean and bring down our cost? But we also have to keep that economic agenda, that if we don't have a workforce that is engaged and working hard, there's going to be real trouble in this room with all your companies and the larger India.
Thank you. Then we move to Gillian Tans. We're very honored to have you here as the chairwoman also of Booking.com. We live in a platform economy, that's for sure, and Booking.com being the platform of the platforms when it comes to travel. You heard what was said about the importance and how consequential the new technologies are. I know that Booking.com also have invested a lot in this region. What are the potential? What are the challenges that you are facing in South Asia, but also the perspectives on what is said about the importance of technology from the other co-chairs?
Yes. So thank you. It's great to be here today. And I think if you think about tourism and travel, today it's a little bit over 10% of GDP. And I think the amount of jobs it creates is the same percentage today. It's great to see that India is playing a bigger and bigger role in travel and tourism and is moving up the ranks. And we like to see the ambitions that India is putting out there, even on international travel, to move from 8.8 million to 10 million customers. On domestic travel, the Prime Minister has asked people to do 15 domestic trips before, I think, in 2020. So that's also something where we're actively involved in to see how we can help with that. What we see as well is the growth in alternative accommodations. India, over the past 2 years, we've seen the fastest growth within Booking.com of any country. We've seen 68% growth. We now have 800,000 listings here in India for customers to book. And then technology is playing a bigger and bigger role. And I think if you think about mobile penetration now is over 500 million customers here in India. And what we see with Booking as well is that second and third tier cities are becoming much more popular. And that's also where we see the need of mobile payments, for instance, that to be able to bring customers into these type of destinations. Then I think if you think about Booking.com, most of the value we create stays in the local economy. So we are a platform, but we basically facilitate local entrepreneurs and we make sure that we connect them to the world. But I think also a company like Booking.com, what sometimes is complicated, if you think about local rules and regulation, it's already complicated that many countries have different rules and regulations, but now you also see the development of platform regulation. And I just want to urge that every platform is different. So it's very important to keep looking at the specifics that each platform brings to make sure that the rules and regulation really fit with that type of platform. And the last point I want to make is on corporate tax. This is something that we see that developed at more and more local countries. We also see it in Southeast Asia, are basically creating their own rules, and there's really a need for a global solution.
Thank you. You have a lot of influence through your platform too. You can incentivize sustainability, CO2 mitigation. You can also promote companies that are living more of its value creation to the local communities. You can also do a lot in important areas as gender parity and all this. How are you able to balance this? For example, on your board, how much are you pushing these issues and how much can you push them without losing competitiveness?
Yes. So
or maybe you gain competitiveness by pushing these issues too.
Yeah, this is also, I mean, if you think about sustainability, this is really a topic that also needs a global approach, and it needs many people to work together to make progress. And even if you think about travel, the carbon footprint, or even the impact that tourism has on local destinations, and that's something that we have seen for quite some time. We're quite active in this space. I think a few weeks ago, we launched an initiative together with the Royal Foundation. It's called Travelist, to bring travel companies together and to make sure that we create general rules for the industry instead of that everybody is creating their own rules, and to make sure that the future of travel is more sustainable. And also what Booking does, each year we bring out a sustainability report where also ourselves we see, okay, how can we innovate? How can we make sure that our products also reflect what we see is needed, but also what we see what customers are looking for? And I think every business today should have sustainability within their strategy. Because we realize with Booking, if you measure consumers and you look at their behavior, that consumers also want to make sustainable choices. And I think that's one of the main reasons why also companies should make sure it's very high on their list as to topics to work on. And yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. And last thing I wanted to say, because that's important for India, with our program, we basically facilitate many entrepreneurs, and we want to make sure that we help entrepreneurs that are active in sustainability to be more successful. And it's so great to see that in India, there's so many companies, so many entrepreneurs that are active. We have Not On Map, a company that we help in India. We have Women on Wheels, Global Himalaya Expedition. So there's lots of Authentic Cook. So there's many companies out there, and it's so nice to see that India is already focusing a lot on these type of initiatives.
Wow. Excellent. Sania Mirza, I think everyone in India knows you. Incredible sportswoman, incredible tennis player, but I know